Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll Masechtas Chulin daf Mem Hey. We are going to begin on Mem Hey Amud Aleph, the first line. We're going to see a lot of pictures today. Omer Yehuda Marav Nikva. Let's say the gargares, the windpipe, has a hole knafa, like a sieve, all around, little holes, mitzdarfen laruba. So it will become a treifa as long as, if you combine them all, that it equals rov. As Rashi says, Il hayakun mechubarim yachad hayruba nifsak treifa. And we saw in yesterday's daf, upoisekes hagargaras, when it comes to tears or cuts in the trachea or the windpipe, it says it's only when it's rov. And we were discussing, is it rov the thickness of the diameter? Is it rov halala, which is more makel of the cavity? So regardless, rov. So even though there isn't an actual cut straight through the rov, but nonetheless, if you have multiple ones which are comparable to that of a sieve, we'll discuss what that means soon, then it's treifa. So Masav Rabbi Yirma, v'golgoylas, when it comes regarding, as Rashi says, Oel Hames, so it's brought down, v'golgolos, when it comes to a skull, k'dei sheyitul min hachai v'yomus havichisaron v'lo matama. So sheishma nekev, there's a hole, echad oirich, which is long, afil yesh ben kavim harbe mitzdarfen, then it will be mitzdarf, l'moli makdeach. A measurement regarding tumas oil is if it's moli makdach or makdeach, a drill. Al makivan dishura moli makdach or makdeach l'moli makdeach mitzdarfen. So hachinam makivan dishuri keiser l'keister mitzdarfen. So it says that when it comes to the skull, that is the measurement. It says Rashi, Almak the shir chisaron golgoyles is kamali makdeach. The amount that's missing is the size of this drill, and keilu havichad nekev, it's like it's one hole. V'liavinu hu shir achrina. We don't come up with a totally different measurement. So we just say it's the same measurement when it comes to the skull. So also over here, says Rashi, Aval gav de poisoka shira laruba gamin kuva. Even though it's true, each hole is not the right size for it to equal a rov. Ad kama tichaser, but if it's missing, it's ad kiiser hayitalki, the size of a coin. If there's actually a hole that there's no flesh there, so in that case, it's the size of a coin. Almanekav hakana trifasu b'kiiser. So why is it that when it comes to these small holes, shouldn't it not require the size of an iser coin, not rov? So ashtimuti hadiyam rav chelba imarav chama bar guria imarav. You kind of forgot there is a distinction between sometimes it's the size of a coin, and sometimes the hole is the size of rov. You're right. In the event where there is a deficiency in the hole, in other words, there's missing something, so then it is the size of a coin. However, which is the case we just mentioned, then it's mitzdarfen laruba. In the case of a sieve, it's not missing anything, and therefore, because of that, all we had, it's going to be the size of rov. That is going to be the measurement. Okay. Omer Rabba Barachano Omer Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Nitla Himena Ritzua Mitzarefes L'Ki'iser. It says if it's missing a strip, in other words, it's mitzaref to the size of a coin. In other words, if the long, thin piece in the length of the kana, so we're going to measure it by the coin, the size of this iser. Fine, that's a long, thin piece. So Bamini Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachman and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Nikva Kanafa Mahu. What if it's like a sieve? Amrulei Hari Amrun Nikavim Shish Behen Chisarin Mitzdarfin L'Kiser. We already said this, that if it's actually missing or is a deficiency, then it's the size of an Isser. Yishin Min Chisarin Mitzdarfin L'Ruba. Okay, so that's the din when it comes to this. Okay, Ba'ofa, however, if we're dealing with a bird, so Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachmani Ledinim Afarsh Limine, the Rabbi Elazar, it was explained mi kafloi maniach al pi hakana. So what we do by a bird, we will cut around the part with all the holes around it, and then fold it over the mouth of the kana. Im chafes rov hakana, if it covers it, treifa. The imav kshera. Omer Rapapa b'simanech nafya. And a way to remember all this, remember sieve. So look at Rashi, that when it comes to a bird, we will have this different din of folding up. Chotech lamatim and hanakavim. We will literally cut from the bottom, from all the holes, you see him and all around them, kapel haritzua, so you can like flip over that flap, klapi pi hakana, opposite the windpipe. Manichol makam hanakavim al pi hakana. So again, if it covers the majority, then it's treifa. Says Rashi, hoyol v'yesh ben chisaron, because it's missing. V'shir smichas nekavim zevazeh kenafa da nikva kenafa kayim. And v'simanech, says Rashi, shotishkach shemozu, don't forget it, whether it's an iser or it's mitzdarf to a aruba, remember a sieve. So a sieve is not deficient, isn't missing anything. Okay, fine. Okay, let's keep moving then. All right, let's look at question 11 first. Question 11. Tana kalma pisekas her gargis baruba. Be'eza oifin shira be'iser. What time is it? Mashahu. 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 Question 11. Negev sheish b'chisarain is b'ki'iser. Ubein kanfei hareya shein makom shchita nidan kareya b'mashahu. Okay, so a whole, I'm not sure if we did this. Let's see. When it comes to the poisekas gargaris is the majority. Is oifen shira b'ki'iser. Oh, okay, so we didn't completely answer this. So in the event where there's a hole which is a chisaron, then it's the size of an iser. We said if it's not a chisaron, so then it will be rov. But there will be a time when it will also be b'mashahu, which maybe we didn't get to that yet. Okay, let's continue in the Gemara. Nivchasa kedelos. Let's say the kana is cut open, but like a sea, like a door. So Omer Rav Nachman kadesh yichanis iser l'rachbay. So could you be able to actually stick a coin inside that area? You can actually insert a coin. So it actually would have to be, as Rashi says, a hacha being a nichnas v'yoytze. It's not enough that it's exactly the measurement of the coin, because then you couldn't get that coin in and out. So it has to be even a larger size than that to make it treifa. Nistika, let's say it's torn in the length. So the lengthwise versus the width, we're going to see is a difference. Says Rashi, when it comes to the length, v'kila makulu, we're more lenient. If it's the width, baruba, it's the majority. The problem is when it's a hole in the width, so you have it's kind of pulled in both directions. You have the lungs, which it's attached to on the bottom, pulls, and then the neck, when it stretches out, it pulls up. So if it's to the width, that can cause, if this way, like horizontal, it will cause it to keep tearing. It's not going to heal very well. A little arca, but if it's the length, like if you will, the vertical, kol kamen shatzaver nimshach hatzadik saiger v'hoylech hilkach hadar cholim. It's going to heal more. So interesting, a lengthwise cut in the kana of the trachea is easier to heal and therefore more makel. as we're going to see now. So, Nistika, if there was a tear in its length, if all there is a chulia, says Ras Tabas, like a ring of cartilage, one on the top, one on the bottom, even though the tear goes all the way up and down, it's still okay. Amar Kamei Rabbi Yochanan. Let's remember, it's Rabbi Yochanan. Omer ma chulia to come Rab. What was he talking about when he says chulia? El ema fil lo nishtarba ela mashahu mala umashu lamatek shera. Not that you need to have an entire ring of cartilage, but even the smallest amount is also going to be enough that it will not be a treifa. So again, we're very lenient when it comes to the oirech, the length, but not as much of the roich of the width. Amru Kamei Rabbi Yochanan Mishmei Rabbi Yochanan Hachi Amru Lahu Yadinan Cha'avrin Bavloi Lafrushi Ki Haitaima, that they certainly know how to explain their reasoning. It says, who's this Chavrin Bavloi? So Rashi says that's Rabbi Yonasan Mibavel Solik. And actually, this, as Rashi says, is praiseworthy what he is saying. Tana Reb Chia Bar Yosef Kamei Rabbi Yochanan Kol Tzavar Kuloi Kashla Shchita, that the entire neck is of an animal's kosher to shecht, mitbas hagadoyla, which we've mentioned before. The tabas hagadoyla is where the rings go completely around, which is higher than the other tabois below it. Ad kanfe reya, until the lobes of the lung. Which lobes? Hatachtoina, all the way to the bottom, which is pretty far down. So Omer Rava Tachtoina Shi El Yoina. Actually, the top lobe, it's referring to the top lobes of the lung. So why does it say the bottom? Because when we're talking about when the animal is hung from its rear legs, so the ones which are on the bottom are really the ones that are on the top. It's just the animal's flipped over. So that's what it means over there. Shani Omer Kol Shepoishetes Savora. Anytime where the neck gets stretched, the roya, and while it's grazing, Uvashlo Te'enes. But it cannot be that it will like forcing the lungs to the neck. Says Rashi, Limsha Chasimonim Chutz L'chaza B'yedei Adam. That's already too far. So let's take a peek at this picture over here on the bottom, so we can see what we're talking about over here. Okay, so we have this picture, and with that said, let's just discuss what this is referring to. So we have the kana, this is the windpipe, and then we have the kanfe hareya, which are the upper lobes. Because even though it says the lower lobes, it means when it's upside down or flipped around. It says over here, a marker has been placed on the kana, the trachea, at the border of the kanfe hareya, the upper lobes of the lungs. In the second photo, the trachea was protracted, and the marker is located far above the lungs. This protraction causes more of the kana to extend beyond the kanfe hareya, the upper lobes of the lungs. So again, this is what we're referring to in this particular picture. Okay. All right. So that is the din with regard to this. Okay. Shani Omer Kol Shepoishetes Savora. A little windy over here. Okay, don't want to lose my place in that other book. I'll just put this over here for now. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So that's what it's referring to. Okay. Boy Reb Chanina. So Boy Reb Chanina v'Itema Reb Chananya onsa atzma, the stretching of the neck itself, mahu, so teku. So that part, as Rashi says, livsheit ma'oid l'tzavara, that it stretches its neck, b'shash shchita mahu, and teku is obviously l'chomer v'chein halacha, the stretching of the neck. That part we are strict. Yosef Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, nafik milsa b'minayhu onas b'simanim v'shachat psula. So this situation took place, and it was possible. Nikav hakana lamatim in a fine. Nikav hakana lamatim in a chaza. If there's a hole in the trachea below the chest or the breast, nidun kareya, then it has the same din as the lungs, says Rashi. Because since it was already at the place where the shchita doesn't apply, it has the same status as the lungs themselves. And therefore, just like a hole in the lungs, even a mashahu will be a problem. And we don't say it's rov. So if you have, again, a hole in the kana below the chazeh, then nidin kireya, that's even b'mashahu. Okay. Which this should be the rest of question 11. Let's say, Bain kanfe hareya, shein mokum shchita nidin kireya mashahu. That's actually what we're looking for. So let's get that down. Nikav hakana lamata min chazeh nidin kireya. Okay, which is 11. Okay, so if it's basically below the mokum shchita, and it's so close to the lungs, it has the same status as the lungs themselves, below the breast. Tonaban ezu chazeh. So what is this? The chest. So zeharoyes akarka lamata. It sees the ground. Ad hatzavor, until the neck. Lamala ad hakerches, until the stomach. Chaytech shteit silayis. There's two ribs go out, mishtei dafanos, from the two walls, eilch ve'eilch on either side, v'zehu chazeh hanitin lekohanim. That is the chazeh, when you talk about the chazeh v'shoik, that is the part that the kohanim received as among their gifts. Okay, before we move on to the next thing, let's make sure there's not another question over here. Yeah. Question TA13. Nikiv hakana b'mashuhim havi treifa. So it's a trick question because sometimes it is. So l'malamin hachazeh, above the breast eno treifa. L'matam hachazeh havi treifa. And that is exactly what we were looking for. That's TA13, which is right here because it has the same din as the lungs themselves. Nidin kareya. Okay, that's what it says. Has the same status as the lungs. Same question, TB 16. So I wrote minachaz lamata shehusam l'choreya treifa b'mashahu. Beautiful. Aval lo im hanekev l'malu min hachaza. Okay, and that's the correct answer. There's nothing else you could say. It's a perfect answer. That's TB 16. Not sure why that is. Of all that material, that's pretty hard, but I guess it is important to know that we know that if there's a mashahu in the reya, that's an issue. Okay. All right, let's keep on moving now. So, nikav krum shel moyach. Let's say you have a hole in the membrane of the brain. Now, we're going to see that there's actually two membranes. The upper, which is attached to the skull, and the lower membrane, which actually envelops the brain itself. And we have a whole bunch of pictures over here. So let's just see this. First of all, you have this picture, which shows the upper membrane and the golgolas and the skull. So we see clearly that the upper membrane is attached to the skull. Okay, that's what this picture demonstrates. And let's continue to see another couple of pictures. So this is going to be another close-up where we'll see the upper membrane and the cerebellum, and then the membrane, and then the chotashedra, and then the spinal cord. Okay, so we can just take another quick peek at this top picture. So this kind of gives us a little bit more of an understanding of what we're talking about when we're dealing with the brain and the spinal column that's attached to it. And then we have another picture which is, as we can see, demonstrates not just the brain, but also the neck, the kana, and the veshet. So this way we can, again, have a better understanding of how these next few lines are going to be going. So this will hopefully make a little bit more sense to us. Okay, so, says the Gemara, Rav Shmuel D'Amritavayu Karma Iloh. When we say that there's a hole in the membrane, that's referring to the upper membrane attached to the skull. Afiga the Nika Inkav Tata. Even though the bottom one, the lower membrane, which envelops the brain itself, there's no hole in it. V'yamru some say no ad the Inkav Tata, that until the bottom one has a hole in it. The way to remember this is Chayosa de Misnanech Be Moicha, the sac which holds the membrane. Says Rashi, Shahamoyach Munach B'toichai, that the brain is like held within it. Omer Rabbi Barachan Omer Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Kenegdo B'Beitzim Nicker. Opposite with regarding to the testes, if it's recognizable. B'Beitzi Zachar, with regard to the Beitzim of a Zachar, and here we do have another picture of that, in which you do similarly see a upper membrane, a karma ilah, and the kis, which we also will call the scrotum. So the Gemara over here is alluding to this. Obviously, this is not the same part as the brain, but it says here, this is referring to the scrotum of a deer that has been opened to show the baits of the testicle and the two membranes that surround it. So again, you have a lower membrane and an upper membrane. So there's two layers, if you will. The Gemara's analogy between the beitzim and the brain is readily apparent. Both are surrounded by a thin membrane which contains a network of capillaries, very small blood vessels. Although the membrane of the beitza is more readily discernible, an outer whitish, thicker membrane along with an outer encasement, fine. So basically all we're doing is just using another part of an animal. Here is a picture of the deer, in which demonstrates there's actually not just one membrane, but two, not just in the brain, but also, as we can see, when it comes to the beitzim, are the same thing. Okay, so that's the purpose of why the Gemara brings that down. Okay. Omer Rav Shimon ben Pazi, Omer Rav Shimon Levi, Mishum bar Kapara, Moyach, Kol Mash B'Kadeira, Nidin Kamoyach. When it comes to the brain, anything that's inside the skull has the din of the brain itself, which means that even the smallest hole is also going to be a treifa. Hiska limshaych, however, once it comes out, it's not inside, nidin kachut shedra. Then it has the same status as the spinal cord, in which the measurement is a rove. That's what Rashi says clearly. Nidin kamayach benikvoy b'mashahu. Anything inside the skull is a mashahu. However, if it goes outside from this encasement, then it has the din of like the spinal column, the spinal cord, which is rove. So where does that begin? So Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani, Rabbi Shimon Levi, he explained it to me. It's kamin shnei poilin. It's like these two poilin. We'll see the technical term in a second in the book. Yesh, there's these two, which are at the opening of the skull. Munachin al pi hakadera. So min a poilin v'lefnim kilefnim. Anything that's from these poilim from inside is considered like the inside, like the skull, and therefore it's a whole even b'mashu. Min a poilim l'chutz kilchutz. So poilim atzman, the lobes themselves, any yodea. Mistaber kilifnim, probably the pulim themselves. Really mean like they're like bean shaped, but we're going to see that's not exactly what they are. Obviously, they're part of the animal. Has the same status as inside the brain, which even a mashu on them would passel it. Rabbi make it a trait for Rabbi Yomi Abodek Ba'oifa. He examined a bird. The Ashlach Kamin Shnei Poilin. He also found these two things. Menachem al pi hakadera. Okay, so let's go look at a few pictures. First of all, let's look at an extreme close-up of these pulim, which are called the occipital condyle, which probably mispronounced it, but that is on the bottom a picture of what these two look like. Now, where exactly on the animal can this be found? So this is a picture of the back of a cow, and you could see where this is exactly. So you can see where the brain is, and then where it ends, and then from that point, them themselves are considered to be part of the brain. Even a whole b'masha will make it problematic, will be a treifa. However, anything outside of that, it's only going to have the same status of the chut hashedra. So it says over here, the chut hashedra, the spinal cord severed, is located between these two polim. The occipital condyles are bones that extend out of the skull and insert into the first chulia of the shedra. So these are like literally the pathways that connect the skull and the brain to the spinal column. So this is like an in-between place, these poilim. So because they are connected to the upper vertebrae of the animal spinal column, so therefore because of that, the question is, what is its status? Is it considered like the chut hashedra, or does it have the status of the brain itself? So we go strict and we say it's like the brain itself. It's even a mashahu. We have another picture over here of a cross section of the head of a calf at the level of its attachment to the neck viewed from the bottom. So this is an extreme close-up, this middle picture, where you could again see the same thing. Okay, so this is all the same idea, demonstrating this same concept. Now, the poilim also apply and could also be seen. Actually, I'm going to show you two more pictures. First of all, I'm going to show you a picture of the animal's cerebellum, which is called the moyach katan, and the cerebrum, which is the moyach gadol. So like literally the big and the small brain, but it's obviously they're just different shapes, part of the brain itself. And then we're going to see the chut hashedra. We can see in this picture, you have the chut hashedra, the spinal column, and then if you look to the right and to the left of it, there you can see these poilim. You can see these occipital condyles, so which are over here, right? These two bones. So you can see they're connected to the first vertebrae, and it's the brain, and it's attached over here. So it's really like this go-between. And we're dealing with a chicken, as we said. They could also be found on a bird, and you can see where these polim exist on a bird as well. So that's what this picture demonstrates, which shows that they are also on a bird. Technically, it says there's only one occipital condyle in a bird, but in many species, a cleft runs down its middle, which creates two protuberances. So it's interesting. It's possible by a bird there's only one of them, not two. It's interesting. Again, when it comes to shechting a bird, the status is different. We have another picture of a bird of a chicken with the cadera, which we call the skull, removed, viewed from the left side. And here we can again see the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the pul hasmoili, this left lobe, and then right afterwards the chut hashedra, the spinal cord. So here's another picture, which again demonstrates everything that we've been discussing, but here it's specifically referring to a bird, where you can see the chut hashedra, and again you can see the lobe over there, which again is the connector bone to the top vertebrae of an animal. Okay, so that is a little bit of a description of this. Okay. All right, with that said, we are going to go weiter. Let's see, is there another picture we want to get into? Okay. All right. I think we talked enough about the brain for a while, and that's what that is. All right, so let's keep on moving. The next part talks about the heart. Nikiv halev l'beis halalo. If there's a hole in the heart, it's got to go into like the inner part of the heart for it to be a treifa. So, boy, Rav Zera, l'beis halalo katan, l'beis halalo gadol, is referring to the small chamber or the larger chamber. So, Omer le'abaye mighty boil. What's the question? Milo Tanan, Rav Shimon Oimer, Achi Tanach Labes Hasim Poinais. He says that it has to go until the bronchial tubes. The Omer Rabba Bar Tachlifa Oimer Rabbi Yirmiyahu Bar Abba Omer Rav Achi Tanach Lasim Poin Gadol. It has to hit the big one. So Hachi Hashta, one second, what does that have to do with the heart? Hasam over there, Labes hasimpoinais katani. There explicitly mentions the bronchial tube. Lahecha deshavche simpoinais kuhu. It's a place where they all go into. Bahacha lebes chalalu katani. Here it says chalalu, which is lashon yachid. Malichol gadol, malichol katan. Perhaps we shouldn't make any distinction between the large or the small chamber. So, let's see if we could take a peek of what we're talking about over here, because we're talking about the large, the small. So, we look at this bottom picture. We can first of all start off by seeing what we're talking about. So there's what's called the larger chamber and the smaller chamber in this picture of this heart of this animal. This is the heart of a sheep with a section removed to expose the two chambers, the chol gadol, the large chamber, and the chol katan, the small chamber. So the question is, how big is this hole? Is the mashu in the big chamber or the small chamber? So it's not so clear that it makes any difference. That either way should be a problem. On the top we have a picture called the heart of a calf, cut open to expose the large chamber, the left ventricle. The kana halev, the aorta, leads into this chamber. So we're going to talk about the aorta shortly, in which the blood of this aorta goes into the heart to pump blood, right? The strings inside the heart are the cordia tendarna, tendons which stabilize the valves of the heart. Okay, so we'll talk about that, and then we have also over here the kana halev, which is what we were talking about, which is the aorta, which goes into into this chamber called the chol gadol. So the aorta connects to this, and we have also here the pulmonary artery here as well. So this gives you a little bit of a picture and a sense of what we're talking about over here. So apparently it should not make any difference. Okay, so again, when we have this, maybe it doesn't make any difference. Kana halev, when it comes to the kana halev, which we are translating as the aorta, which is the primary blood flow which goes into the chol gadol, which goes into the large chamber. So Rabbi b'mashu, even a small hole in the aorta will make a trade. Shemul oimer b'rubai. So hi nihu kana halev. What is that? So Rabbi Yitzchak Amarav chaylev she'al gabi defanois. There's this fattiness upon the walls. So defanos we're talking about the wall of the animal. El she'al gabi daifnei reya. It's on the top of the walls of the lungs. There's actually three pipes that we are need to focus on. There's three pipes, and we're going to see. First of all, let's just look straight at this picture, this middle picture, and while we do that, let's see the Gemara. So chad parish liba, one goes to the heart, which is the aorta. The chad parish l'rei, one to the lungs. The chad parish l'kavda, and one of these pipes goes to the liver. So what is the status of holes in any of these pipes? So one, again, the kana halev is the aorta. The kana is just the trachea, which goes to the lungs. And then you have what's called the simpoin hagadol, which is the vena cava, which goes to the liver. So what is the status of these three pipes? So the din is like this. Dereya, korea. When it comes to the trachea, it has the same status as the lungs themselves, this pipe, and therefore it's going to be even b'mashahu. The kavda, when it comes to the liver, to the pipe to the liver, it's only if it's removed completely, as we said, if there's nothing left. The liba, apparently because it's not as significant as the kana, the liba, when it comes to literally the liba is the aorta, pligi mar b'marachia mas sutzamachlokas. Okay, so we already mentioned that one opinion says the b'mashu. Mas the ivcha, the rei of b'kavda, kavda korea. The liba pligi. Some say it's the other way around, that the pipe that goes into the lungs, the kana, is the whole thing removed. Kavda, the kavda is like the rei, even a mashahu. And again, when it comes to the aorta, is a machlokas. Also, Rav Chia bar Yosef Amar Lishmaisad, the Rav Kamed Shmuel Amalei Ihachi Amar Abba Lo Yad Betrefas Lo Klum. If that's the case, he really doesn't know much, and the more you learn this, the more you realize how much you don't know either. So anyway, so we're going to Rashi. The Amr Lishmaisad Rav, the Amr B'Mashu who Kamed Shmuel V'Kati Lo Havi Shemiel the Rav B'Sor Rosh Yeshiva V'Hasam Havi Amr B'Shmaisad Shmuel. Okay. Fine. Okay. Nishbar Hashedra. So that goes again talking a lot about the heart, and now we're going to go into the to the Shedra. So the spinal column. All right. So I'm not sure how many more pictures we're going to show here. So let's just move on. So Nishbar Hashedra. So Tanaban Chut Hashedra Shenifsak Baruba Divi Rabbi. So according to Rabbi, he says that it has to be that the majority of it's severed. Rav Yaakov and Rafil Nikiv, even a hole in the Chut HaShedra will make it a treifa. So Hayu Rabbi Karebi Yaakov, the paskin like the shittas of Rav Yaakov, that it's even a hole. Omer Rav Huna in Halach Rav Yaakov. No, Halach is not like that. The Kamarubai. So if in fact we say it has to be the rove of the Chut HaShedra, so how much is that? Rav Omer Rov Oyroi, the majority of the outer membrane. The Yarmela Rov Moichai, the majority of the moyach of the Chut HaShedra. So Mandiyamar Rov Moichai Koshkin Rov Oiroi. If you hold that Rov Moichai will make it a treif, then certainly the majority of the outer membrane will. Mandiyamar Rov Oiroi Rov Moichai Mai. So what we say? So Tash Mandiyamar Yuli Yamar Ramhuna Ruba Shamru Rov Oiroi Moyach Zel Lo Malvo Moided. So this mayach is ulmalav loy moided. What does that mean? Says Rashi. Maybe not. Yuli shem chacham. Okay. It doesn't. Another doesn't seem to be a. It doesn't make it good. Doesn't make it bad. That's what it means. Rav Nasin Baravin Havi Yosef can be the Rav Bodik Borayv Oiroi. So he's examining the majority of the outer membrane, which seems like he held a Shitas Rav. The Kabodik Borayv Moichai, but he was also being Bodik Borayv Moichai, which sounds again like if you hold Rav Oiroi, so you also hold Rav Moichai. So Amelo Imar of Oiroi Kayim. If the majority of the outer membrane is intact, then Moich Zeh Enu Mailav Enu Moided. So you don't have to worry about that. So Omer Rabbi Merchano Omer Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Nismanech Posel. If by the Moyach of the Chut HaShedra, if the marrow splits open and it's liquefied in that way, or for that matter, it's posel, and nismasmes posel, if it's soft, like a jelly-like figure, then it also is posel. So ezi hamarkava ve'eza hamismasa. What exactly is this? So hamarkava hamaracha, which we said it's the marrow spills out. Kol shenishbach kekitoin. It spills like a jug. Misamsa is kol sheni yochel amoid. If the spinal cord can't stand up because it's like jelly-like. Okay, let's look at question 12. Chut HaShedra shenisak rubo treifa. Ha'im zehu rubo oiroi or rub moicha u'shneihem. Difficult question. So one says or the oro, the outer layer, or the moichai. One says oiroi v'loi moichai. Okay, that's the correct answer. All right. Okay. Weiter. Boy Reb Yirmeh. Enu yochel lamoid memnei kvedo mai. Take. What if, let's say, the reason why I can't stand is because it is too heavy. So it says Rashi, shu'ob, it's thick. That's the reason why. Not because it's jelly-like, but because it's the opposite. So then that's a teku, whether it's a treifa. Rav Amri nismasmes posel. As we said, if it's jelly-like, it's posel, the Chut HaShedra. However, nismasmes kosher. If it's somewhat leaked out, then it's kosher. So we see that it's a treifa. It's not kosher. So hahi nismasmes itmar. That's referring to if it's nismasmes, that it's mamish jelly-like. But if it's only somewhat leaked out, then it's okay. Eini v'hol Levi Havi Yosef Bib Masusa. He was by the bathhouse. Chazil hu gavri. He saw a person did tari l'reishi, hit his head. Oimer nismazmez moichi dedain lav d'loichai When he said that his head is like leaking out, probably is not going to live. When he says treifa, just means that he may not be able to procreate. It says Rashi, because the birth of a person comes from the head. But shigid hanasha shel yerech v'gid hagavia kul mechubar mechut hashedra. Everything is connected to the spinal column. Shu mis patzel v'yotzim etachas hashedra. V'nasagid eitz ha'yirechayim v'nichnas ha'soichay. So basically, he's saying that he's going to die. You're not a treifa, but maybe he won't be moiled. Okay. Fine. Let's see. We'll have this. Shenu moiled. Okay. Adkan.